So just for anyone I haven't met before, so I'm Patty Gerke. So I'm part of the Compassionate Communities team, and we are a small team in the Diocese of London. I think we're all here today, which is very unusual to all be in the same place at the same time. And we have 3 brilliant speakers with us today, and we're focusing today on community sponsorship. So we've got the brilliant Amina, who is from the charity Reset. We have the Reverend Diane Peters, who is the lead sponsor for Camino Guildford, and some of that group are also here today. And then we also hopefully have Domenica, and Domenica is the national church representative for community sponsorship. But Domenica's on a train, so we will see if we manage to get hold of her through the call. And just in terms of our structure for today, so we're going to hear from each of our speakers. We're then going to have some time at the end for questions and answers. So if people do want to post any questions and answers in the chat, and then we will address those at the end. So I'll kind of field them to each of our speakers at the end. So I think in terms of housekeeping, that's probably everything to start with. So I'm going to hand over first to Amina. And Amina hopefully is going to give us a kind of overview of what community sponsorship is and how it works. So thank you very much for being with us, Amina.
Brilliant. Thanks, Patty. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for your interest in community sponsorship. So as Patty mentions, I am from Reset, and we are the charity that is, we're contracted by the Home Office to train and support people all over the UK to welcome refugees into their communities through community sponsorship. My name is Amina, and I lead the Reset's programs team, which includes leading on the delivery of the community sponsorship program. So I'm here to talk to you about what community sponsorship is and how it came about. So let's make a start, and let me now share my screen with you. So just bear with me as I do that. And for all the attendees here, if you could just give me a thumbs up so I can make sure you can see my slides okay. Perfect, thank you. So as I said, I'm going to start by giving a brief overview of what community sponsorship is and how it came about. Now, because you're all here or you're all watching this session, I'm going to assume that you already know that there are many millions of people who are displaced around the world. And I'm also going to assume that you care about this and that you want to do something to help. So in that case, let me jump right into talking about community sponsorship and why we think it's a really amazing way to take positive action. So community sponsorship is a program that allows you to welcome refugee families directly into your local area and support them as they build fulfilling lives here in the UK. To explain how community sponsorship first came about, we do have to go all the way back to 2015, which is when, as some of you might remember, people all over the UK in their thousands spoke up and told the government that refugees are welcome here. In response, the government, and this was David Cameron's government back then, made a commitment to resettle 20,000 refugees by 2020. Now, at this point, a number of charities, including many faith-based organisations like the Church of England, got together and they said, we've got so many people who want to help and so much energy around this. Why can't we do more? So they saw it as a really special opportunity here to ensure that when refugees arrive in the UK, they're really welcomed, really supported, so that they can come here not just to survive, but to thrive. Basically, what a huge waste it would be if all of these people who have been so motivated that they've actually come out onto the streets just simply switch off. So these organisations started calling on the government to let communities play a much greater role in welcoming refugees. And they pointed to Canada as an example that we could follow here in the UK. Now, Canada's system of refugee sponsorship is where ordinary Canadians can apply to the government to welcome a refugee family themselves, taking on some of the responsibilities that here in the UK, local government has normally taken on. So through this programme, not only has Canada welcomed more than 350,000 refugees, but they also seem to have tapped into something quite special in terms of social connections. So more than 1 in 3 Canadians now knows a refugee personally. And the country has been comparatively resistant to the sort of anti-immigrant, anti-refugee sentiment that we've seen in other parts of the world in recent years. So the government here, our government here in the UK, listened, and they decided to try this here. So they call the program community sponsorship, and the first family to arrive through the program was welcomed in 2016 by the man that you can see on your screen here, someone you might recognize, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. Now, from that very first welcome, right in the heart of London, the scheme grew. The second family was welcomed to Manchester, then towns on the south coast and Devon and Cornwall got involved, tiny villages right over in the west of Wales, towns in Yorkshire, Northern Ireland, Kent, Edinburgh, big cities in the north like Liverpool, until every region and every nation was doing community sponsorship. And we're so pleased to be able to now say that there are now more than 300 community sponsorship groups across the UK. It's really important to stress here that these groups come in all shapes and sizes. So absolutely anyone can set up a community sponsorship group. You don't need any special qualifications or specific experience. You just need the resolve and commitment. So we have seen sports club set up groups. There's a running club up in Newcastle and a rugby club down in Hampshire. We've seen places of worship getting involved. So of course churches, but also mosques and synagogues, universities and schools have taken part, and even a pub quiz team. So it really is all shapes and sizes. And perhaps most special of all for us at Reset, at least, is seeing these groups that are made up of people who didn't know each other before doing community sponsorship. And it just took that one person saying, I want to do this, I want to welcome a refugee family, and then going out and knocking on doors, handing out leaflets, posting on social media, whatever it was they had to do to find the people in their community that felt the same, and then working together to make this idea a reality. So at Reset, we have trained more than 4,000 people across the UK to welcome refugees through community sponsorship. And what does this all mean in practice? What are all of these thousands of people doing with their time? So as a community sponsorship group, you make a 1-year commitment to support a refugee family as they settle into life in the UK. And the things that you can expect to support them with in that 1 year are things like learning English, accessing education or employment, accessing the benefits payments that the families will be entitled to claim, and accessing any healthcare that they might need. And then what community sponsorship groups are so uniquely and brilliantly placed to support families with is making connections and building relationships with the people in the local area. And it's these connections and relationships that ultimately really make you feel at home somewhere. Now, I know that as volunteers, you need to know what sort of time commitment you're making. So I've already mentioned that as a sponsor, you make a commitment to support a refugee family for 1 year. And we've looked at the sort of things that you'll be doing in that year. And it probably won't be a surprise to you that community sponsorship does also involve quite a lot of work even before you've welcomed a family. And this is all the work that goes into making sure you're fully prepared to support them. And this can take on average anywhere around 6 to 8 months. So what I want to go through with you now are the things that you'll need to do to prepare for the family to arrive. So I'm going to talk to you very briefly about 6 things. So 6 things. The first thing that you'll need to do is to get a group of people together. The reason for that is that community sponsorship isn't something that you can do on your own. It really is working together as a team. Secondly, you will need to connect with a lead sponsor. Now, this is very much community sponsorship specific terminology, but let me explain further. So every community sponsorship application must be supported by a registered charity that will take on the legal responsibilities associated with community sponsorship. So this organization, this charity, is called a lead sponsor. There are a number of charities across the UK now that have acted as lead sponsors for lots of community sponsorship groups, including the Church of England. And when you partner with them, you get all the benefit of their expertise. So they are there to support and guide you. The third thing to know is that you'll need to get consent from your local council to submit a community sponsorship application. This isn't something to worry about initially, but it's just something to be aware of in your journey. So when you get to the point that you are looking at approaching your council, we can absolutely help you do this. And also, community sponsorship does involve a lot of research and planning in the early stages. So things such as contacting your local schools and finding out if they have places available, and if so, in what year groups, if you are welcoming a family with young children. So once you've done these 4 things, you've got a group together, you've got your lead sponsor, you've got consent from your local council, and you've done your research, you are going to be putting all of this information into an application form and sending it off to the Home Office. Now, if this sounds a little daunting, please don't worry. I know some people can get a bit intimidated when they hear the words Home Office, but we will be with you every step of the way. And you will have training that covers the application process in much more detail. And we can even check your application before it goes into the Home Office to help make sure it gets approved. Now, once you have submitted your application, there are 2 things for you to be getting on with while the Home Office look at your application. The first of these is raising money. So every community sponsorship group needs to raise a minimum of £9,000. And this covers things like the cost of interpreters, things like school uniform, if there's children in the family you welcome. The second thing, quite crucial, is finding accommodation for the family. Now, you as a community sponsorship group, you are not expected to buy a property and you are not expected to pay rent on a property. The family will be entitled to claim benefits here in the UK, which they can use to pay towards the costs like rent. Your role as a group is to source accommodation that will be affordable for the family and available to them from the day that they arrive in the UK and for the next 2 years. Now, I said 2 years there because the idea is that when a family first arrives, you might be providing quite a high level of support. And then this should slowly decrease as you equip the family with the skills that they need to live independently. So ideally, by the end of that first year, the family may not want or no longer need a high level of support from you anymore. But because a year really does pass very quickly, the accommodation will just continue seamlessly for a second year. So those are the 6 things that you'll be doing to welcome a refugee family to your neighbourhood. So let's just do a very quick recap. So firstly, you're going to get a group together. You're then going to connect with a lead sponsor. You're going to speak to your council about getting consent. You're going to research and fill out the application form to submit to the Home Office. You'll need to do fundraising, so you'll need to raise the minimum £9,000. And of course, really importantly, you'll need to find accommodation for the family. Once you've got all of this in place, the Home Office will approve your application and match you with one of the families identified by the UNHCR as being in priority need for resettlement. So I will stop right there as I'm conscious of time, and I will hand the reins back over to you, Patty. So let me just stop sharing my screens. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much. That was really clear, and I enjoyed the fact about the group that started in a pub as well. I knew there were various sports groups, but I hadn't heard that one before. So that's great. Thank you. And Amina will field any questions to Amina at the end. What I'd love to do is to interview Reverend Diane Peters. Now, Diane, we have just made a film about the group of which Diane is lead sponsor, which is called Camino Guildford. And some of the group are also with us here today. And the aim of the film really was to encourage other church communities to know really what community sponsorship is and how they might be able to explore setting up a group as well. So I think hopefully Jill might be able to at some point put the link in the chat to the film. It's just a 3-minute watch, and we would love if people could share that as widely as possible with contacts that they have. But Diane, thank you ever so much for being with us today. So could you tell us, I mean, Amina touched on it briefly, but could you just tell us a little bit more about what is the role of lead sponsor? Because that's probably not something people will have come across before. And what does that role involve?
Well, for us, it's really involved holding the group together, getting the group and holding it together, making it an entity, I think, is done a lot with, the role has been a lot in the early stages with sorting out the paperwork, getting the paperwork, making sure that it's ready to be submitted to the Home Office, collecting bits from various members of the group to build that application together, really creating that whole vision ready to submit to the Home Office, and then holding that as we go through.
Fantastic. And just for people's information, how long, I know that you've welcomed the group from Syria, how long have the family that you've welcomed been in the UK now?
They arrived in December, so they've been with 7 months. Yes, yeah, settling really well.
And it was it was wonderful. I mean, I didn't actually get to meet them on the day of filming because I was only there in the morning, but it was lovely to get to meet them through the film. So
I thoroughly enjoyed making it as well.
Brilliant. And from a faith perspective, why would you say that welcoming refugees is important?
I think it's the bedrock of our faith, really, right? If you go right through, through the scriptures from the Old Testament, right the way through, welcoming the stranger, welcoming the alien, looking after those who have no home, no visible means of support, it's part and parcel of our faith from time immemorial. And particularly so as you move into the New Testament times with the gospel imperative to welcome the stranger, to look after the poor and the dispossessed, and in doing so that we're also looking after God himself, that this fantastic imperative, really, you cannot but not do it with your faith. I think also the people you meet, you never know, the people you meet, the God that they bring with them too. As Hebrews has it, you meet the angels when you welcome the stranger.
Yeah, entertaining angels. And what have you enjoyed most about doing community sponsorship?
Lots. The shortest things I think would be the family themselves, meeting with them, traveling with them through this stage of their journey, and learning about them, their culture, them as people, and then the work we've done with them. I think also the working together as a team, that the way in which the group was formed and then supported the family, so that interaction between group members and with the family themselves. I think the relationships.
I think so many groups that I've talked to, they've said actually relationships that are, just such an important part of it, and the new relationships developed. I think lots of groups I've spoken to, it's not just the relationships with the group, it's also new relationships with the wider community, which
absolutely, you meet so many different people, so many different walks of life through what you're doing at that point, from the social side through to the actual need side of finding school places and all the other things that we need to do.
And we don't want to pretend that everything is easy. We want to be honest about what the hard bits about community sponsorship are as well. So what would you say have been some of the key challenges for you and for the group in community sponsorship?
Well, the first challenge in southeast of England is actually finding a property, because the will was there quite early on, but finding a property that you could actually afford, or a family were going to be able to afford to take on themselves, it was probably the biggest challenge. And for us, we were able to find that property, but actually we couldn't tie that in with the time of arrival for the family. So financially, that was quite a big struggle for us, because we were paying rent on an empty property in order to keep it and have a property to hand for when the family actually arrived. So that probably was the single biggest difficulty, because it created financial difficulties as well as the time difficulties. Timing is probably the issue, trying to get everything in place at the right time, so that you've got the permits, so that you can get the bank statement set up, that you can get the school places, and that you can do all these things within a time structure that's going to allow you to do that financially, or you find what you're having to pay out yourselves before the benefits arrive, and so on. So that, I think that's probably the biggest things.
That's really helpful, thank you. And I mean, you've journeyed 6 months with the family now, but also all that kind of preparation time. What would you, if there was another church community and they were thinking about doing community sponsorship, what are some of the learnings that you would share with them?
Well, first of all, go for it, because it is such a joy and a privilege to do it, that it outweighs everything else. The learning, I think, creating a team. The team has been crucial to the success of or not of the programme. To support each other through the harder times as well as the joyful times, but also that various expertise in the knowledge that you need over that period of time, and to be able to share the work out so it doesn't become too much for any one person. And the joy of working as a team too, that the fact that when you work together, you learn together and you make different relationships again. So I think those are the big things, I think, from that. Yes, creating a team.
And how did you go about building that team? So, because we might have one person in a church in London who might think, well, I'd love to consider this, but I don't have a team around me at the moment. How did you go about building the team that's become Camino Guildford?
It was through contacts that we had built up ourselves through our work with refugees across the diocese prior to this. So 2/3 of the group already had worked together, fundraising and supporting some Syrian refugees in that. And we knew each other, knew what it, and decided to get together to create a team. And then through that, we knew other churches and groups who were also focused on refugees and refugee needs, and so approached them as to whether they would like to be part of a group doing this, and that's where it was. But it was through the network of knowing people who had a heart for refugees and would like to be involved in it. And ours is an ecumenical group, so it's churches from Catholic Church and the Church of England as well. So it wasn't sort of confined to one area. But also, I think the fact that the diocese in Guildford was a central point to which people were referring to and were coming to when they wanted to get involved with refugee work, so that a lot of our contacts had come from people wanting to volunteer or wanting to know what there was to do as far as refugees were concerned.
Fantastic, that's really helpful, just sort of the practicalities of how you went about that. And final question, what out of all the support that's been available, what has been some of the most helpful support for you, both as you've considered it in the first place and then as you've kind of embarked upon actually doing community sponsorship?
I think first and foremost was the group itself, because that will to want to do it sort of helped us all through. But alongside of that, there were two other major ones. One was Reset, who once we decided and we wanted to get to be able to come back, to know that when we emailed, we got a reply back and we could talk to somebody and get the knowledge that we needed. So Reset were extremely helpful. Talking to other people who had been on the programme. So I had contacts with two other groups, and we talked to them, asked them what had worked for them, what had been difficult for them, and we arranged a joint Zoom between our potential group and them, and so that we could question them. So experience of other people was really quite valuable.
Excellent, and I would definitely second the support from Reset. I think, Reset are definitely one of the most responsive organisations that I think I've worked with. I think I get a reply within about half an hour from Amina on anything I ask them. So, and I've heard that a lot from different church groups. So, and is there anything that you think I've missed that you think is important to mention before we kind of go into next steps?
No, I don't think so. But I would just like to flag up actually that this is one of the very few ways of welcoming refugee families into the country, and it is such a joy and such a privilege to be a part of that. Yeah, I think that needs to be flagged up as well. You're not on your own.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Diane. Domenica is with us, and I know her connection's been a little bit unstable, but we're going to see if we can do that bit. So Domenica is the Church of England's national representative for community sponsorship. And we've just invited Domenica to give us a bit of an overview for the Church of England's vision for the growth of community sponsorship, and also just share a bit about the work so far in community sponsorship. So I don't know, Domenica, if you can hear us and if you wanted to present.
So, justice through community sponsorship. Why are we talking about justice when talking about community sponsorship? Let's see. Okay, we are all born with a map. This is a gift that's been given by our family. This map helps to clear our way, make us aware of the faults, and guide us through the right path. These maps, they guide generations over generations to overcome obstacles, nurture the future, and navigate life inside out. Have no use when people cross borders. Families who are forced to flee from their homes, like the families that community sponsorship groups are able to provide sanctuary for, leave their maps behind. Community sponsorship groups gifts, donate their maps to help others find their feet. There are, according to Reset, there are 24 Church of England community sponsorship groups across the country. And Patty will then later share the wonderful work at Guildford Diocese. So, we know that from Amina's presentation that community sponsorship groups help resettled families, funding housing, finding a school placement. But what is it what that community sponsorship groups do? They offer a place of welcome. They make a property, a home for their family. They help the family adapt to new culture and to a new language. They help families to find safe employment. They help families to find their place of belonging. And they explore ways with the families to be a community together and to belong. This is what a group may look like. So a group of 5-8 people. And then, as Amina said, to apply to the Home Office with help from Reset, if you want help from me to compare with other community sponsorship groups. Is that true that community sponsorship groups can still apply in principle? And then, thank you, Amina, they will need to fundraise £9,000, and 99% of Church of England groups have found this a very easy target. They need to find a home for 2 years that the family will be able to afford. 75% of community sponsorship group from our churches found it a bit more challenging. However, the 1 year of interdependent support is a transformative experience for 100% of the responding groups. Thank you. So that's my Church of England email address. That's my phone number.
Right. So we're just going to move now for any questions. So if you're interested in exploring this, what would be some of the next steps in terms of taking this further? So firstly, I'm just going to hand over to Amina again, and just from a Reset perspective, hopefully you can just outline what support is available from Reset, what resources are out there already that someone wanting to take a next step might be able to tap into.
Absolutely. So the next step for anyone is to firstly get in contact with us at Reset. So we're very happy to have a phone conversation with people who just want to speak to somebody on the phone about what this is. And what we tend to recommend is people come along to either a community sponsorship intro session, like the one I just did today, or you come along to what we call our Part 1 training, Planning Your Application. So it's a 45-minute webinar in which we talk through in a lot more detail the timescales, the application process, the stakeholders involved. And that will give you a very good sense as to what is actually involved in terms of the work required by volunteers. We'll also talk to you about approaching a local authority for consent, but before we do that, we will guide you towards lead sponsors that you can partner with. So often when we have organizations coming in from a faith background, they will, partner with their church as a lead sponsor. We've got many churches who have acted as lead sponsors, and also other, charity organizations like the Salvation Army, other organizations like Citizens UK. We've got many lead sponsors all dotted throughout the UK, so we can also help guide groups and help them find the right lead sponsor for them. In terms of what we can offer to a community sponsorship group to help prepare them, get them ready to welcome. So there's our training. So there's all groups have to undergo mandatory training. So I mentioned the part 1 training, that's mandatory. The other piece of mandatory training is what we call part 2, getting ready to welcome. And that comes much later on when you've already formed your group, you already have completed your application, you've already found a house, you've already fundraised your money, and you've submitted all of that to the Home Office, at which point the Home Office will give you full approval. And that's when we will come in and we will deliver the part 2, getting ready to welcome training. And in that training, we go into a lot more detail about the kind of approaches you should take when directly working with the family. We will talk to you about an empowerment approach. We will talk to you about boundaries and managing expectations, both of the family, but also of yourselves as group members. And we'll also talk to you about some of those cultural differences that many families encounter once they come to the UK. But on top of the mandatory training, we also offer what we call our core skills training. And this can look like a whole plethora of things. So our core skills training includes training on universal credit, training on supporting survivors of gender-based violence, training on adopting a trauma-informed approach to working with refugees. And we also partner with other organizations who we commission to come and deliver training to community sponsorship groups. So specialist trainers in Afghan culture or specialist trainers in Syrian culture will make sure that that's the thing that you think would be most helpful for you, then we can ensure we have that in place for you. And then on top of that, we also have our community sponsorship website that is absolutely chock-a-block full of resources and stories and advice from groups and families. A lot of what we've learned at Reset has come directly from groups who have done this and from welcomed families. And anyone who goes onto the community sponsorship website will see that we've got whole sections on housing, on fundraising, on immigration, on health, on ESOL, and on interpreting. So a lot of the times many groups will say to us that if they have a question and they go to our website as the first stop, then many times, often, almost always, that will answer their question for them. But we're also very happy to be contacted. So you can email us, you can call us if you just fancy a chat.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I think we've got Domenica is off the train now as well. I was just going to ask Domenica, from a national church perspective, what support and resources are available from the national church, just so people can understand how the role Reset play and then the role the national church play.
Thank you, Patty. Thank you, Amina. The role of the national church is very direct. At the moment, you can see that there is a web page dedicated to community sponsorship, and people can get in touch with me if they want similar. Our approach at the moment is very much informative and supportive. So if emerging community sponsorship groups, they want to understand, for example, how to form a group within their parish so that they can also get to know other people from the community. There are many ways, for example, to organize community sponsorship, community teas, for example, with Reset. But also, as Amina said, whilst the Church of England per se, as a big entity, is not acting as a lead sponsor, there is a reason, because each church is a charity within the Church of England. And so each church, through their PCC, can apply as a lead sponsor to sponsor a group. That could be an ecumenical group, can be an interfaith group, can be also, within people of faith, people of no faith, or can be a pure parish group, with people, a congregational group with people from a specific congregations or different or a wider congregation. For example, we have benefices, and this benefices can also be part of 3 different churches within the same benefit. So that's a possibility. I'm here to share also my own community sponsorship journey. I've been gifted to be one of the co-founders of Canterbury Welcomes Refugees, and we have settled 2 families in Canterbury. So anything that can support and inspire other people, this is what we can offer at the moment. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Domenica. So I think hopefully so I'm obviously here for churches that are based in London as well as a point of contact. And so I think between Amina, Domenica and I, hopefully we can point you in the right direction to the right kind of information for your next step. And I think as Diane said, often it's actually speaking directly to another group who have already journeyed a bit further on that journey. And between us, we can always link people in with groups that are already doing community sponsorship to share some of their experience on that. So I was just going to say, just in terms of questions, I don't know if there are any questions from people in the room. I was just before that as well, I was just going to say everyone's contact details will be on the kind of follow-up email and information as well, so that people can get in contact with us directly. But yeah, I don't know if there were any questions from anyone in the room, or any things that, for Domenica or Amina, that church groups have asked, when they're first exploring this. So are there any questions from anyone in the room? Yes.
Thanks. Amina, quick question. So what's the staffing level at Reset like?
What the staffing level at Reset is like? So we are just a small team. We're a small charity. So there are currently, as of this week, we are 13 people.
13.
Yeah, 13 people, and the majority of those, the team I lead, programs team, so with myself included, it's 7 of us who are in the programs team, and the rest of the staff are distributed in our operations team and our communications team, and of course we also have our CEO, Kate.
So it's a very small team.
We are a small team.
Okay, well, thanks for that, Amina. Thank you.
I think it's always hard to know, isn't it, with organisations, actually, the scale of you punch above your weight, I would say.
I think so.
I think there was a question from Jill. Do you want to ask that yourself, Jill, or do you want me to?
Yeah, I was going to ask for the average. People have asked me, how long does it take from when you first start thinking about it and you get in touch? What's the average?
Oh, I mean, average.
Yeah,
it's a tough one, and it gets tougher and tougher as it becomes more and more difficult. Some of the more common obstacles, I think we'd all probably not be surprised by, is finding affordable housing, right? That's a thing that we do see set a lot of groups back, which is why community sponsorship does require persistence. So we've got many groups out there who have been searching for a long time, but they're not giving up on finding a property. But in order to answer your question, I would say average, probably, I would say a year. So from someone who is sat watching this right now and thinking, oh, I could do this, to actually being in an airport welcoming a family, a year, give or take, is an average.
That's really helpful, thank you. And I would say, just in terms of accommodation, I've also just had some amazing, stories of faith of actually, we had one group, and I think they'd had a new vicar come in, and he'd ended up being lead sponsor because it was a community group, but the church acted as lead sponsor, and someone literally turned up at their first community meeting that they had and said, I have a property that I'd like to offer, and that was the missing piece for them, and then everything else kind of flowed from there. And yeah, so I think stories of prayer and provision, I think we found it from some of the churches that have journeyed us so far have been amazing, but it is often still a challenge.
It is, and at Reset, it's really important to be really transparent about what the challenges are so that volunteers who are getting involved know what they're up against in doing this amazing thing that they're doing.
Absolutely. And I mean, in terms of nationalities, because that's something we often get asked, would it be someone that could be from any country? Are there particular countries that, families come under the community sponsorship? How does that work?
Yeah, so this has changed in the last a few years in terms of the diversity we're seeing in the families coming through community sponsorship, but also general resettlement in the UK. So if we think back to 2015, what we had then was what was known as the Vulnerable Persons Resettlement Programme, otherwise known as the Syrian Resettlement Programme, where anybody who had fled Syria could come to the UK through this programme. So when community sponsorship started back in 2016, only a year after the VPRS launched in the UK, community sponsorship groups were really only welcoming Syrian families. And now that we have, so the VPRS came to an end in the beginning of 2020, if I'm getting my years correct. And what we replaced that with, what our government replaced it with, was the UK Resettlement Scheme. And the UK Resettlement Scheme was launched with the intention of being a much more broader, wider global resettlement scheme. And initially with the UKRS, we were still seeing predominantly Syrian families coming through. So Syrian families who are of course in need. But I would say in the last year and a half, we've been seeing a lot more diversity in the families that have been coming through. So we're seeing a lot more Sudanese families, Iraqi, some Palestinian families, Eritrean families. So historically, it was only from the MENA, Middle East and North Africa region that refugees were coming from. But now also we take refugees from host countries in countries like Indonesia. And I think I'm correct in saying this, that on the Home Office's resettlement list, because they do have a resettlement list, at least a third of that cohort is now from the East Africa, Horn of Africa region. And the other really great thing about now, how resettlement works now and how community sponsorship works now, is that we've also seen groups who've been able to welcome a family who have recently suffered, a really horrific sort of geopolitical incident. So something like, the horrid earthquake in Turkey, Syria earlier this year, there was one group who welcomed a family that were affected by that earthquake. So we've also seen a group starting more now to be able to use community sponsorship as a way to respond to more current humanitarian crises as well.
Thank you, that's really helpful, Amina. Were there any other questions from anybody before I just kind of wrap up? I don't think so, I can't see any other hands. Anyway, I just wanted to say thank you to all of our speakers. Just so much information there, really clear in terms of next steps. We will send an email through and that will have a link to the recording of the session. We would encourage people to share that widely with others as well. We will also put that on our YouTube channel, which is where we have all the recordings of our trainings, so you can share that link as well.